join me here for a minute. What I'd like you to do is think for a minute, whatever your patron or patroness is, and think about them, put them in your mind's eye, put them in your consciousness, and really welcome them into the circle. We are so glad that you're here. I think we are all still really, really excited that we've all been able to experience a great interfaith, a great conference. It's been really great that we've all got to meet each other, meet people from other faiths. I know everybody has brought tools, who's going to be bringing tools back with them. I want you to take a moment to thank the God and the Goddess for those gifts that have been given to us. And thank the God and the Goddess for allowing us to be together and have this great ritual space and an opportunity to have community together. And I want to thank all of you, especially as a Carillion, that you're here to enjoy and participate with our rite, because it means so much to us that you are here. So thank you, God and Goddess. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
You know, I'm serious, I have a clipboard. Well, welcome my ladies, my lords, honors and esteemed guests. I am honored beyond words. We are honored beyond words that you have joined us. We have had many choices tonight, and I'm so glad that you're joining us for the Carilion's Lustration of the Living. After the Parliament of World Religions, the sixth one. I've been very fortunate that I have attended 5 out of the 6. Well, I attended 6, but I can't prove it because reincarnation doesn't really get it. This last week we have seen what the world needs and needs from us. Within all of it has been a magic, an act of intent that has basically taken the world religious leaders of the world, and they have basically expressed our community's deepest beliefs. Who would have believed that would have been possible? They would have expressed our deepest beliefs. If a pagan designed the parliament, we couldn't have done a better job. Honoring women. You know, you've heard all the numbers. And of course, when we had a Wiccan who became vice chairman, she embraced the world. And that's been very important. You know, and so I owe great esteem to Reverend Dr. Phyllis Shryock for what she did for us. We honored our planet. And oh my gosh, when they said Earth is calling, I thought Smitty wrote that song. Right? Yeah. So we saw them singing, you know, and basically the holiest leaders of our planet, male and female, all came together this week and proclaimed what we already know. It is time to honor our mother. It is time to honor the earth, and that what sheer joy this has been. I cannot imagine from where I began that this would be the parliament in which a lot of great dreams would be fulfilled. It's been a very, very tough journey. And so, my tradition asks me to speak about it, because I've been carrying a lot of water for it. And so my journey began when the Parliament of World Religion was just forming in Chicago. 2 individuals, Baha'is, came out, a couple of people came out, they wanted to do it. In 1990, I joined the office. Here I was, a wet behind-the-ear kid, 27 years old. And to be honest, a little bit of drinking, a little bit of smoking, that's not really focused. Had kids, but I started to volunteer with them. And I had been a gardenerian at the time. And basically, Donna Cole Schultz was my mother, and she was passed from this thing. She gave me regular grounding. She was the first person to really give me acceptance. To say it was okay to be who I was. And she just said, you'd be a fine priest. I go, me? A priest? No, come on, you're just kidding. And she says, oh, no. So I don't like ritual very much. She said, there's a lot of other needs. It says each person gets called to their duty. Little did I mean that this would be a 26-year journey that would take me. And then basically, from that, by the time the Parliament came, I was a newly minted second-degree Wiccan, both in Gardnerian and Carillion traditions at the time. And I became something called the Assistant Stage Manager for the Plenaries. Now let me tell you about the first Parliament. What they did at the first Parliament was 7 days in Chicago over Columbus Labor Day weekend. And the first 3 days, they sent us all in the main room at the Palmer House for 3 days of sitting from planetary, morning, noon, and night. I was going home exhausted from that event. But in there, I learned about the sacrifice of leadership. Every Parliament has inspired me and changed me as who I was as an individual. You wouldn't think that an event could do that. You wouldn't think that, people talk about events that change their lives. So you think an event can change your life once. Every time they've done, I learned a new lesson. And in the first one, I learned about the service and sacrifice and how to be brave. Yeah, being brave. I was there at Parliament, and here I was. I'd gone to the Navy, did a captain's young, so I learned how to talk to admirals and things like getting calls, how to stand up to them. Once I got in trouble with the captain, he said, the admiral's calling, he said, I don't want any phone calls. I don't care who it is unless it's an emergency. And an admiral once called, and he said, you put me on right away with Captain. And of course, he was named Captain Christensen. It was kind of an interesting thing. He said, if you don't put me on right away, I'm going to put you on report. And I go, okay. I found Captain and hit the captain's button, and he took the call. For the next 2 weeks, he put me on extra duty. He put me on everything. He says, I told you no. You have to be able to understand, you have to stand up. And he taught me, he says, the admiral puts his pants one leg at a time, and if I gave you a command, follow it and have faith in me that I would have protected you. That was a big lesson for a 17, 18-year-old kid. Have faith where authority lies. Because even if the forces come from other places. But in Parliament, I had to learn about more than that. I had to go up to religious leaders. I had to go up to do things. And it wasn't all that smooth. So we had one big incident that was really important to us. So I learned bravery because India and Pakistan at the time were big, no nuclear bombs yet, so they were still at war and they'd been fighting. And there was a big incident happening at the Parliament where the Indians were on the stage, and they got put off, and then the Pakistanis came on the stage, and I was wearing black, and they said, all you stage hands have to get up front. And of course, as the assistant stage manager, I had to go up first. And they weren't sure there was a gun or something in the audience or they were about to be rushed. So I had to put my life, I had to make a decision at that moment. Was I going to put my life on the line for a religious leader who I didn't know, really didn't care about? Absolutely, what do I care? But it is. But my commitment to the Parliament, my commitment to my spirituality, my commitment to myself, I stood there and I sweated bullets until I let us go off. So that was bravery, but that was a different type of bravery. That's easy. That's bravery in a minute. So the next thing that would happen that I would have to solve, and talking about negatives, is the Native Americans were in the room doing staging. And they had a lot of cops. Seriously, a lot of cops in there. And they came barging into the Native American room. They did. And they were going to arrest these guys for smoking marijuana. And we had to spend like 20 minutes standing on stage right then. And I'm hearing in my ear, the planetary guy, they walking down together, get those guys up here right now! And I still remember Yvonne, she was a great stage manager. And she yelled in my ear, like, get them up here right now. She had a mouth like a sailor. She needed to. She got them up there, and we had to go there and had to face the cops, police. Chicago police, you know. Yeah, so that sort of thing. And so they finally set the stage, and we finally explained it to them. They finally backed down. And of course, we were able to get on stage. They did a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. And they lifted our hearts. And so that was that. And the last thing I learned, I had to sometimes clean up my own people's mess. Who knew that I would have to do that? What do I mean by that? So Mother Tongue came on stage, and so they were told instructively, Jeff, do anyone know who Jeff McBride is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Magnus. He was told he wasn't allowed to do any tricks on stage. They were just allowed to sing. And on the last song, he started throwing confetti everywhere. Now, Yvonne's screaming out there, I told him not to. And there I had to get everybody together, and we had to clean. We literally had less than 2 minutes to clean that entire stage of thousands of pieces of confetti. And it was really, so we just kind of moved it across, we got it off. And then as he comes off, as he was coming off the stage, he said, "I told you not to do it." I said, "Yeah, but I had to." So I learned about another type of bravery. Sometimes you have to have a great show, have a great moment, you have an experience in which that audience who cheered him for it, sometimes you do have to defy authority. So I learned bravery as a Parliament. And I learned one other thing. Anybody, at any time, at any place, can find their lives changed that fast. And that happened to me. The great lady Olivia, our Holy Mother, whispered in my ear. She basically had seen me, and I basically said, and most people don't know, had been threatened, truly threatened, to the point where there was actually real fear in the world. Yeah. And so what I would do is every time we would walk from the stage to the stage, I would walk on whatever side the public was. And she called me her paladin. It's like, "Oh yeah, you're my paladin, good." And I would walk her off on stage and walk her back to her people after every time. Because again, that was my job, assistant stage manager. And at the end of this, she decided there was going to be a big national picture, and a lot of people wanted to be in that picture, as Isaac, Oberon, there's a number of them. And she decided to grab me by the neck and says, "You belong in this picture." "No, I don't." And all of a sudden, when people saw that picture, they go, "Who's this guy?" And so they automatically assumed, because I was with these other people, that I was a new youth minister. That I had national information. And so, at that moment, I began my life as a pagan priest. And lastly, she whispered in my ear and gave me a sacred duty, which I'm continuing to carry out, 26 years later. And I'll talk more about that later. So, finally, time goes on. I do a host committee. We put out a book called Your Voice. And the host committee kind of fell apart because pagans were not yet accepted. And a lot of the other groups, where they're still trying to make strides, as beautiful as this Parliament was, imagine the Tower of Babel. The first Parliament was more like the Tower of Babel than it was like this. So imagine this huge strides that come to this Parliament. I always say, you overestimate what you can do in a year, underestimate what you can do in 10 years. And you cannot possibly believe what you can do in a lifetime. And so, there we were. And so basically, they kind of killed our host committee, utilizing the book that I put out, Your Voice, because it was the Parliament of the people. So I've always been more dedicated to the people than the authorities. While I respected them, I had always looked at it. And so, back in 1999, I went to the Parliament. 3 weeks before the Parliament, I didn't have enough money for my airfare in the hotel. I had some of my money. I had already been applied. And the great archpriestess, Lord Jansar, says, "Oh, no, you're not. You have to go." I don't know, I don't have any money. She says, she literally handed me her credit card. Wow. Literally handed us her credit card. And trusted me enough with her credit card to buy my airfare, my food, and my accommodations. And I used it gingerly, because I didn't do it. And she did it out of the goodness of heart. And she said, "You're representing Fellowship of Isis there." And she says, "You're representing us as well as everything else that I did." And I was able to go. A miracle. A true magic. And so the intent of me going, she gave it to me. I could not possibly believe that was going to happen, but it did. Now, the Parliament of South Africa was a little bit better. It was less contentious. But the big fight there would be, who should be our right to be in the Parliament? Now that we had another one, it was like, who had the right to be there? And they were screaming 100 years. Scientologists were there. Baha'i were there. Every group you can imagine was there. Aborigines, Africans, a lot of beautiful African, Zulu, all of them. I got to meet a prince. I actually became friends with a prince, and I still am to this day. Yeah, he's still a prince, so he never became king. So. Yeah. It says, once a king, always a king, but once a knight is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. He actually has 4 wives, too. So I learned about that. But I also began to build kinship. Kinship with people of my heart. And so, one of the great friends that I made out of this, I made a lot of great friends, but one friend I made out of this who would change my life, who would be a mentor to me, would be Lady Selena herself. Because that was something that she had a smaller crowd, she would look out, she would grab me. Every time I would go past her, she would go, "Hi, Ed." And I was still kind of a little bit off about his leadership and things like that. She would say hi to me, and we would have conversations, and she kind of and she started putting my focus on her. I learned to share. I learned to trust the divine. And I learned one other thing. So Michael York, if you know who he is, Michael York, was doing a class about what it means to be pagan. And in that moment, the Catholics were starting to be contentious, and there were some others that were contentious, saying, oh, pagan is in there. And after he described what pagan is, the Aboriginal leader stood up and says, we too are pagan. Then the African leader said, we too are pagan. And at that moment, all of the indigenous people stood up with York and said, we too are pagan, if this is what pagan is. We are not godless, we are very much in the divine. And at that moment, my heart really swelled. I was very, very proud of it. Because I didn't understand yet, because I was still young. I mean, come on, I'm a little older, but I was still young. And that was at that. And I also did one thing. So even before that, I learned the act of revelation. If you know about Abby Willow, let me tell you a little bit about Abby Willow. In 1998, on December 3rd, the goddess spoke to her. She absolutely spoke to it. And if you don't ever believe, you ever see intent, you don't believe in intent. Trust me, this is one of those moments where I see. And she said, well, get all the artists of the world. I said, well, artists don't want to do this. And she heard it in her head. An artist is anyone who can pick up a crayon. And she decided she was going to do art. By this point, I'm getting really into the internet. I started the Daily Spell, the Daily Goddess, right before the Parliament. And so I liked this project, and I joined the project. And I eventually become a right-hand man on the internet. And I brought this project to the Parliament. And lots of people did things. And we ended up in 65 countries. Wow. And over 1 million pieces of recorded art were created.
Wow. Wow.
And I ended up being the guy who got to represent the goddess in the Goddess 2000 project at the Parliament. And I was like, oh, this is great. I mean, this is kind of strange. But did I feel worthy yet? No. I still felt small. I still said, well, what good is it? Why am I doing this? Why are you having me do these things? And the answer was, you can. And if you can, you do. I also learned the sting of discrimination and intolerance at that moment. I got into many, many arguments with people there, and one of them finally came out and says, even if you put your whole community together, you don't have, according to UN standards, a minority religion. You're just a bunch of cults. And I went, what's a minority religion? How many do you need? And in the UN Declaration, 100,000 is their number for minor religions, sustainability of languages. And he goes, what do you need? 100,000 people? I go, okay, I will do that. A little more than 2 years later, I would open witch school in order to see if there were enough Wiccans and pagans in the world, we just didn't know who they were, to do that. And as you know, the story of that is we've gone on to, it's gotten actually pretty big. And I just retired from it, but it got pretty big. But that moment of the Parliament, the second thing that Selena, I, and a bunch of the other people, covered the goddess, circle, and as Representative Fellowship said, called Laura to make sure it was okay. We promised South Africa. So I saw, can you imagine living in a country where we were never allowed to pick up a book that it was anything that wasn't biblically based and government approved? Literally, your words, your people's words were not there. Now, apartheid had ended, but the starvation of knowledge was so strong, they needed books. And so we ended up sending almost 800 books to them in the library, and they had a system that was very interesting. I think it would be great for us to do today. They didn't have public libraries. We didn't put it in any institution. They all had these libraries, all the pagans had libraries in their homes. Carol Nolan did, and a couple of the others, Sandra, Andy Fisher, and they would take part of the books, and they put it in their homes and lend them to people that would bring them back. So this is how they got information. But there was one book that already made it there. A lot of people. So they earlier had smuggled in 2 cases of books. Big Blue. Ray Buck. So that was a buck that died. So we got there, and they were grateful for that sort of thing. We have now, as our tradition, just completed, I guess this year, a second library there. It's now in Cape Town, in Windy House. It's got
500.
Huh?
500.
And Lori was the one who finished that project for me. So guess what I learned in the time? And so that was it. So I decided I was going to be ridiculous, so we got that. So we went to 2004. And in 2004, I learned two things. How to beg from my life from the goddess, because the first day there, I got so terribly sick. I won't get you the essence, but you can understand. There was multicolored yawns and a whole lot of other things. And so, in that moment, I learned how to be so big for my life, because I really wanted to be there. And the second thing I learned, and it was just very simple, how can you be a diverse people if you don't speak languages? The Parliament in Barcelona had one really strange distinction for me. A lot of people didn't speak English. A lot of Spanish, German, French. It was actually the most multilingual piece. And of course, they didn't have a room in the place that could hold us all. So we were doing a lot of outdoor stuff. And it was probably the most difficult Parliament. But to me, the language thing was like, whoa, why don't we have more languages? Right? And they said, well, visual works. Oh, okay, visual works. And the next year I would start Magic TV. 2005, we were one of the first YouTube accounts. We started Magic TV. And we started looking at translators. And by 2009, probably, we had What is Whip in 19 languages. Harry Potter versus, we've also had, What is Whip in Ritual in 4 languages. We've had a number of pieces. But we had 19 pieces in 19 languages by the time we hit 2009. And that's when it is. So at the 2009 Parliament, I got to do something. So I got to be a reporter. I got to be the first paid reporter that was officially recognized by the Parliament. Now, I didn't get it right away, because I called him up and go, why am I not being accepted as a reporter? Is it because I'm a pagan? And the other guy goes, no, it has nothing to do with it. I go, well, I can't possibly imagine what else it is. And he went, remember, there's always another answer. And I just swore. That was a moment of victimization. You are doing it because I'm a pagan. No, you're new social media. We're not approving this new social media. What? Because I use blog and TV? And I just started a radio station, Peggy Tonight. They go, no, we don't want it. He says, oh, okay, so I'm going to put that out to my people that you are not approving new media. And I explained to them at that time that we didn't have a really strong media. And I asked them, do you want me to call up Circle? Because they have an official magazine. I did, and they called up and I said, you don't want me to go over to call? Because they have an official newsletter. Do you want me to call around my community to get the official papers for you? And I go, I would do that. Or I just would tell everybody what you said. An hour later, my phone picked up, my approval was there. So sometimes discrimination isn't what it seems. And of course, then I went on, and as everybody knows, at Peggy Tonight, we broadcasted for the first time live in the Parliament. Passion Company, all those shows are great. And they're still available for anyone who wants to listen to them. We got to sit in the middle of the Parliament. And Don was first Parliament, he was doing it. We got to sit for like 6 hours over time getting the broadcast pages. They would sit down, and other people would just sit down with me and have a conversation. That was an amazing feeling to have a conversation. And from there, I knew that Peggy Tonight always had to be an open set of voices, which is continued in its policies. And that is that as long as you don't swear, as long as you don't curse, as long as you don't attack another system, I've always believed that everybody has a right to their own voice. And at that moment in 2009 Parliament, and as you know my career, you may not know why I do it, but I've always allowed everyone to have their own voice. And more importantly, I've helped people find their voice. Ebus has gone on to actually do it. He's actually started a second station on Spanish radio, right?
Yeah, I am.
Liz didn't think she could ever do radio. And she's gone on to be one of our best stars on it. Yeah? So, I've always believed in more voice. And that was always something to do. And I did get one moment. I got myself in trouble. I spoke truth to power. I stand by what I said. But I heard something very strange. If you look on the boards there was no Wicca. Literally no Wicca, no witchcraft hunts, nothing. They decided to identify paganism at that Parliament as only the indigenous religions of Europe and the Mediterranean. I'm a trustee. from 2 trustees had basically said, this is what we've established. And I wrote a very straight, and remember, I wrote a lot of stories. Every one of them impressed with this one. This one got me ostracized. But I spoke about it, and they said, that's not what I said. I said, well, tell me what you really said, and I'll plan a retraction. They never did. They never spoke to me again. And they, that's the sort of thing. They never spoke to me again from that point. But the truth is, I talked to power. So I learned that talking truth is not protection from you sometimes having to deal with it. To this day, I still stand by that. And the final thing, I don't know how many people know me when I was younger. I had a paralyzing fear of heights. Remember, every time I was in Miracle, I had a paralyzing fear of heights. Truly paralyzing. I would have to crawl at heights. I wouldn't get on a ladder. I wouldn't do anything. And so I was walking. I got to be part of a group, do my little reporting thing, following the chairman of the parliament and all his little people. And if you knew where this thing and that was all glass. Glass escalators. Glass railings. And open spaces. And in order for me to stay with that, and they had a little building in the center of it where they let the scaredy cats take elevators up and down. So that was it. So I would have to have left that, gone, about 1,500 feet. Yeah, it was really that fit. I felt like it. And everything else. And so I got onto those stairs, and I just focused. And by the end of the week, and anyone can attest to the truth of it, my fear of height was gone. It was. And it's so true. And it was something that Dalai Lama said, there's nothing to fear that is not within your heart. So last at least, the question is, what am I going to learn from this parliament? I don't know yet. I do not know, because you can't get an answer today. But what I can tell you is that 2 things have happened. One, I am so honored to have had some really great mentors. I mentioned Selena Fox. I've had David Sassman as a mentor. I've had a number of great mentors with that. Oberon Zell was a mentor, Isaac Bonos was a mentor. As I've been going through this process, everybody kind of gave me some respect, and they treated me like the junior member of the national squad. And I got basically told this time, guess what, Ed? I just retired. I just literally retired. I'm going to talk about that, and it'll be the last thing I talk to you guys about, because this ritual is worth seeing. And I've been told, well, guess what? You're going to have to transcend that. So I've been, once again, picked up by the collar, this time by another level, says, you got to start acting at a higher level. Now remember, I thought I was going to be finished, because I'd gone on to be the guy who said, well, feed me. And I took that literally, so I started an earthworm business in Chicago, and I make soil. And I thought that I was done with this. And what I did is I basically made sure, it took me about a 2-year process to get off of it. And so, in our tradition, Lord Don represents wisdom. Our first elder, Stephanie, represents the leadership of our future, the wisdom of the future. And we have an emerging leadership that is really strong. Lori Denham, yay. She's been taking on a lot more duties. Susan, we have Jean, did a great job with being a representative. And she actually talked about diversity. And of course, our very special friend, the tradition would be so lost without. He does not take rank, he does not take title, he barely acknowledges that he has been that important. Mike Neal. And I'm excited about our new leaders, the leaders that come out of here, who are now being caught by their collar. And trust me, they're all being caught by their collar and they're feeling it.
Yes.
Eblis, Liz, Dory, Alyssa, Sam, and Karen. Now Karen had a very interesting event. She didn't know what prepared. She actually got pulled into a workshop that she was not really prepared for, and she had to prepare at the last minute, right? And so let me finish in this. And I was able to do one other thing that's been in my heart, and that is I was given an oracle. I was given actually a longer oracle. I won't get into much of it because it was more private. But I was able to see it happen. I never believed it. I was told that when the goddess had re-entered the hearts of men, and the Parliament was going to talk about the earth, that there would be a moment, because the Lady Lydia was never going to return, who gave me this thing. She said, carry this one message, the message already been given, because my successors are going to be there, and they're going to reassume their role within the Parliament. Now, come on, you think about that, when you hear about UPGs and all of that, you don't think of it real. But this is the first Parliament in a long time that they returned in force, and that was a beautiful ceremony this morning. And so if you're asking me about miracles, my life is a miracle. And so, in this Parliament, I did do one thing. I learned to be proud without hubris. I've learned to love without conditions. And I have been able to see that no matter what work we do, the work is always worth it. And for me, the Parliament is the center. The interfaith is my center of my spirituality. Because I think God speaks to us in 1,000 languages. And we do her the favor in returning that. So we're going to now, thank you. And we're going to move on to the Lustration and
Greetings, honored guests. Welcome to our lustration ceremony.